Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are new here, my name is Aura, I'm a pharmacist based in Ontario, Canada, originally from the UK. Here on my YouTube channel, I share all things pharmacy, career progression, health and wellness, and all those great things. I also have an Instagram page, so make sure if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for joining. It's so great to have you here today. This week, I am starting a new series where I'll be talking a bit about relocation, essentially talking about money, the importance of kind of money and the thoughts around money when you're moving to a new country, especially as a pharmacist, and what kind of things you want to think about if you're considering moving to Canada specifically. One of the biggest questions I get a lot on Instagram or YouTube or via email is, how much do pharmacists make? You know, what is it like to kind of transition? How much money do I need to bring? You know, what kind of things do I need to think about when I'm moving as concerns my finances? All those different things I'm going to touch on. I'm going to be releasing bi-weekly videos, so please make sure that you stay tuned, stay connected, plug in. And if you have any questions or comments or any other things you want me to explore, please make sure you comment below, send me an email, whatever it may be, so I can remember to do that. So how much do pharmacists really make? Do pharmacists in North America make more money than pharmacists in the UK? The simple answer is yes. Pharmacists in North America do tend to make a lot more money than pharmacists in the United Kingdom. Now, I've worked in the United Kingdom, lived there for many years. So essentially, I've seen over the years the transition in terms of compensation for pharmacists and just generally for doctors, nurses, anyone in the healthcare system. And I can definitely attest to the fact that North America compensates a lot more than the UK does. Now, obviously, it depends on the sector of pharmacy you're in. So, for example, when I was in the UK, I noticed, and I think it's probably still the same, community pharmacists get paid more than hospital pharmacists. So if you're a pharmacist working for, you know, a private kind of chain like Lloyd's Pharmacy, Boots, or, you know, Co-op, whatever, you're more likely to make a lot more money per hour than a pharmacist in hospital. Now, I worked as a hospital pharmacist predominantly through my career in the UK, and I can be completely transparent that when I was working as a hospital pharmacist, I think my salary probably went all the way up to maybe under £40,000 per annum, and that was as a band 7 pharmacist. The other thing to think about is in the UK, if you're working as a hospital pharmacist, you tend to go up in bands. So we start at band 6, which is kind of junior pharmacist level. And for me, I was a band 6 in 2014. That's when I secured my first band 6 position. And that position was a starting salary of £25,000. And obviously, every single year, the salary goes up. It doesn't go up by that much. I think maybe like a couple £100 or £1,000. But by the time I got to the end of my band 6 journey, I think I was probably on £27,000 per year. And when I became a band 7, I took on a band 7 role. So when you finish your band 6 and you've done kind of your junior training, you then go on to working as a band 7 pharmacist. So I took on a band 7 role, and I think, again, like I said, it was around £38,000 per annum. Now, like I said, it depends on the sector, but the sector is not the only thing. The location, as a hospital pharmacist working in the NHS, if you are working in, for example, London, you get what they call a London weighting. So your salary will be a little bit higher than somebody who is working maybe say in Liverpool, because the cost of living obviously in London is much higher. So when I was doing my junior training, I actually worked at a hospital which was just on the outskirts of London, and I would see often on my pay slip where it would say London waiting, so there'll be an additional kind of like additional amount given towards the fact that the hospital is kind of in that London M25 vicinity. Now, like I said, community pharmacists, on the other hand, I had friends who were already making 50,000, 45,000, working as community pharmacy managers or community pharmacists in one store. So generally in England, in the UK, community pharmacists tend to make more money than hospital pharmacists. In Canada, when I moved here, I found that it was different. Hospital pharmacists make more than community pharmacists or retail pharmacists. Now, I have worked in Canada for about 3.5 years now. And in those 3.5 years, I have worked both as a community pharmacist and a hospital pharmacist. I currently work as a hospital pharmacist and have been working as a hospital pharmacist for about 2 years now in Canada. Now, I do community pharmacy or retail pharmacy on the weekend, and I did have a job in 2020, 2021 where I worked in a community pharmacy for a year. And generally, I will say that job was much lower paying than my hospital jobs, the hospital jobs I've had in Canada. Location is very important. If you are in Toronto, like in the city, right in the heart of the city, or maybe you are in Vancouver, BC, your salary in terms of community pharmacy or retail pharmacy, they're likely going to pay less because there's so much competition. There's so many pharmacists. There are pharmacists coming from different countries who are willing to take less. But essentially, there's so much competition, so it means that community pharmacists or managers, owners can pay less. I have even seen some jobs in Toronto that are paying a pharmacist $38 an hour. That is like a slap in the face. So yeah, generally the consensus is in Canada, hospital pharmacists do make a lot more money than community pharmacists. The important thing to remember is most hospital pharmacies or hospital organizations have really great incentives aside from salaries. So, they pay good. Some of them may not be as great as others, but they have great pension plans, they have good benefit plans and things like that in comparison to some community or retail pharmacy organizations. Most jobs, especially in hospital, so this works both for England and Canada, in hospital your salary will go up at least once a year. So every year there's some form of like increment that happens for all hospital organizations, and that is kind of standard both in England and in Canada. Whereas if you're working in retail, if you're working as a community pharmacist, you might have to bargain with your manager, maybe have some meetings with area managers or regional managers for you to bump up your salary. So generally, as a hospital pharmacist, you will see an increase in your salary over time. Whereas as a community pharmacist, and this goes for in the UK as well, if you start on, say, £45,000 a year, your salary probably won't shift much in like a 10-year period. It will probably stay the same, whereas your colleagues in hospital, their salaries will probably go up. Just a couple of things. I do have a couple of points, so you might see me looking down. So like I said, my salary as a band 6 pharmacist when I was in the UK, I started at £25,000 a year. At the time, I thought that was actually a lot of money, but now looking back, £25,000 is not a lot of money at all. The fact that you're going to pay tax. If you went to the university in the UK and you have a student finance, you're going to be paying back your student loan. If you're someone who has a car, or even if you're taking public transport, you're going to have a transportation budget. You're going to need to feed. So I think every month, I can't remember what £25,000 was, but again, going back to when I became a band 7, I think £38,000 was approximately maybe just under £3,000 a month. I think probably much less than that, so like £2,700, which I think is quite low, to be fair. So £2,700 every month. That was kind of after tax, after student finance. That was how much would go into my bank account from my £38,000 salary as a band 7 pharmacist in a hospital. The other great thing to mention and to input here is in Canada, most organizations pay you bi-weekly. So every 2 weeks, I get a certain amount in my account. Personally, I think that's quite low for a pharmacist in Canada. I think most pharmacists make a lot more than that. I wouldn't say it depends. It depends on where you are, where you're working, what province you live in. So again, provinces play a huge role. So I live in Ontario. Ontario is very saturated in terms of the number of people that live here. Most people who move to Canada love to be in Ontario or BC, British Columbia. If you're in a province like, I don't know, Nova Scotia, or you're in Prince Edward Island, those kind of areas, they might pay more because there's not as many pharmacists there. I've done some research and went to look at the average salary for a pharmacist in Canada. Now, this for me, again, goes based on what I know some of my colleagues get paid, what I've been paid as a pharmacist in Canada. And on average, a pharmacist in Canada makes around 100,000 Canadian dollars a year. So that's kind of the average. So between 100 and 105,000 Canadian dollars a year, which is above 60,000 pounds a year. Depends where you are. And again, as I said, as the years go on, your salary increases. But also aside from that, the important thing to note is you can negotiate in some circumstances. I'll give you an example. The more experience you have as a hospital pharmacist, you can negotiate your salary. So if I've been a hospital pharmacist at hospital A for 5 years and I've had 5 years experience there, and I want to move to hospital B, I can tell them, well, I've had 5 years experience and this was my last salary. They will match that and probably give you more in terms of your salary per annum. Pharmacists in the UK earning 60,000 in hospital are usually band 8 pharmacists. So you're like senior, you're like antimicrobial lead. Some people even like chief pharmacists earning that money. So I don't think that's bad to start off with. It's a lot more money to start off with. The other side of this is the USA. Lots of people obviously move, when we're talking about North America, we're not just talking about Canada, we are also talking about the USA. Pharmacists in the US are cashing in big time. I think I realized this when I first started doing my Canadian exams. As I mentioned, if you go back to some of my very first videos, America was always the place that I initially wanted to move to. But because of some other things and some other, kind of like decisions I had to make, Canada was the most appropriate for me in terms of my future goals and the things that I essentially wanted to be able to do as someone who worked in North America. In America, the average salary for a pharmacist is 146,000 USD, which is about 120,000 GBP. I think we need a moment of silence. Like, we actually need a moment of silence. So 120,000 pounds is probably what a GP partner in London or in England gets paid. I was working in England and I would go on NHS jobs. I would see that a consultant, a registrar, the salary is 120,000 pounds. Now, why is the money in the US a lot higher? Their healthcare is privatized. Obviously, it's not governmental, so most people pay for their healthcare through insurances or out of pocket, things like that. So essentially, it's easier to pay the pharmacist more. However, I think there is also an issue with just pharmacists generally. I think this is another video that I might have to make at another time, but pharmacists generally standing up for themselves and really demanding what they are worth. I think sometimes what we do as pharmacists is shortchange ourselves. And this especially goes for pharmacists coming from other countries into a Western country. Now, I understand that obviously times can be hard, things can be quite frustrating financially, but I think it's important for us to try and negotiate a lot more. And this is speaking to pharmacists in the UK, pharmacists even in Canada. Don't shortchange yourself. When I first came to Canada, I was looking for Canadian experience. I was looking for that, and I took on so many different types of roles that now looking back, I realized I was really shortchanged. And as much as in the time and in the moment, I really needed to find a job and just work because I needed to make sure I got my permanent residency. I needed to make sure that I had Canadian experience on my resume. I needed to make sure that I just got my foot in the employment door. I look back and I'm like, I really shouldn't have taken on some of those roles, because organizations will shortchange you if they know that you're desperate. They will shortchange you if they know that you don't know what you're worth. So I think negotiating salaries is so important. Talking about your experience, the fact that I have so many years of experience, so why should I be paid this much? Also talking to some of your colleagues. For me, speaking to some of my colleagues and finding out what other people are earning or getting paid or being paid for in terms of the work they're doing gives me kind of an idea of what I could potentially earn. Obviously, it varies with country, organization, all that kind of stuff, but it's important to have an idea of what's out there. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this video. It's so important to know what others are getting paid and how essentially you can negotiate your way into earning a lot more money. The general gist is there is more money to be made in North America. North America is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but some of the ways that I think if you are a pharmacist working in the United Kingdom, some of the ways you can actually make more money is adding some extra things to your resume or to your life. When I was living in the UK, I worked a full-time job, which was a band 7 job for some time. But on the side, I was also actually working relief shifts or locum shifts on the weekends. So I would go and work at Lloyd's Pharmacy. I would go to a local pharmacy, near my house. I was doing a lot of shifts at Lloyd's Pharmacy, but I would go to different pharmacies. And those are ways to basically earn and just have extra cash in addition to what you're already making. The other piece and the other part, and I think I've spoken about this and I've got a video about this, I will share that video, the links to that video in this video, is locuming full time. So at some point in my career, whilst I was in the UK, I decided that I did not want to have a full-time permanent position anymore. And I quit essentially to be able to do my Canadian exams. And I took on a locum hospital position. So locum hospital pharmacy position is where you get contracts. So you're a contract pharmacist. I would work for a hospital for 4 months and then work for another hospital for another 3 months. And sometimes they would extend, and you end up being there for like a year, 6 months or whatever. Now, this can be dangerous for people who are maybe, have kids, you have a mortgage to pay, all that kind of stuff, because yes, obviously, they can end your contract at any point or any moment, or the contract can just be, 2 months and you obviously need an income. But one of the things I always say is for pharmacists, there is always going to be work. So I remember that before I came to Canada, I actually had a period where my contract ended early. So I moved to Canada in January. I had planned for my contract to end in that January before I came. However, the contract ended in December. I wasn't scared because I ended up securing another contract for like 2 weeks in January before I moved to Canada. So I worked for a retail pharmacy chain for 2 weeks right before I moved to Canada. So that was very helpful. So there's always gonna be work. There's always gonna be relief shifts. There's always gonna be locum shifts and all that kind of stuff. Yes, it's stressful, you're not in the same environment all the time, but these are just ways that you can add extra cash into your pocket if you need it. Locuming on the weekends is something I still do today to keep up with my, kind of retail skills, understanding what's happening in retail pharmacy, but also to add some extra cash to my pocket. It's very important. You can, add some more skills to your resume as well. Like if you're a pharmacist who's able to do hospital, but also do retail, but also do, compounding and all that kind of stuff, like it's really, really good to add. The last point I wanted to make is to just make sure you have a work-life balance. It's very important to have a work-life balance. If you don't have work-life balance, it can be very, very stressful. If you're working all the time, you have a full-time job, you're doing relief shifts, it can be too much. So try to have a work-life balance. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching and sticking to the end. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the description box. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are you someone who's in the UK thinking of coming to Canada? Are you someone in another country thinking of coming to Canada? Are you thinking Canada or America? Are you kind of like confused about which one to go to? I'll definitely have a video up about that very soon, but I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next video.